Welcome, everyone. This is the Cosmic Consciousness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Sage. And this was a surprise, and a very pleasant surprise. I think we had already planned to have a podcast with Lorain Fox Davis. I have known Lorain since 1992 in a close personal way. We were having trouble at the college I was teaching, having someone put together a sesquicentennial conference. And the person that was supposed to be in charge of it sort of just had all sorts of difficulties pulling together guests. And I said, well, I happen to be on the committee at the college, and I said, I know somebody I think can help pull this off. And I contacted Lorain, who I knew through her husband, David, and it was a fabulous success. And so the other awarenesses I have of Lorain is you are also a Grammy winner, as well as being Cree and Blackfeet. I think you guys won a Grammy for the Native American or Indigenous Album of the Year, and you can even tell us what year that was. But I believe the title of this 2008, and the title of that was "Come to Me."
Oh, right.
Yeah. Oh, great
Come
mystery.
To me, great
I thought
mystery.
it was.
You're right.
Come to me.
And I didn't win. I didn't win the little Grammy thing, but I got a Grammy statement because there were 5 of us singing different Native songs. And so I could tell a little bit a story about that down the line later.
Well, I would like you to start with your first awarenesses of being in conversation, in contact with the great mystery, with the spiritual awakening, spiritual life. And I know that for us white folks, that sounds like it's a separate compartment for kind of the rest of our lives. But for Native Americans, it is so intimately a part of what your way of life is and what your consciousness is. So I don't know if you'd like to start with that, and then we can talk about some of the spiritual masters that have influenced you along the way.
Well, my first connection was when I was about 4 years old, and my father loved to go fishing, and sometimes we would go visit my Indian grandmother. She was Cree, came down from Canada, and Dad would go out and dig worms, and Grandma and Dad and I would go fishing. And it wouldn't take very long before I'd get bored with the fishing, and I'd go wander. And one time Mom was with us, and she said she went looking for me, and I was talking to animals. A little group of animals. And so I think that had to be my earliest connection. And I've had a connection with nature ever since.
Do you still feel like you communicate with
I do. We have a coyote and a bobcat and different animals that come into our backyard. And just this morning, I go up every morning. We live outside of Tucson in a very special kind of protected place. And I take a little walk and go up and sit on a bench that some kind person put up there and sing to the mountains. And I did that this morning, yesterday. And maybe if there's time, I'd love to sing that song, because it's a song that was on the album that won the Grammy. And there's such a special, well, I'm just going to jump ahead for a minute, if I could tell this story, because I think it kind of sets the way for how my life has been. I was invited to go down to South America by a group that was supported by the, name just went out, Noetic Science. And a friend who was on the board said that she thought that I would be a good person to go. There were 3 medicine men, Potawatomi, Navajo, and Apache leaders that were going down, and there were supposed to be 3 medicine women. And the medicine women dropped out, and it was just me with the guys. And then my friend said they needed somebody who could translate Spanish, English, really on a deeper level. And so I suggested David because he had translated for Maestro Rafaela for years, and Humboldt's man, the Mayan teacher. And so he came down, and we went to South America and had an incredible time in the upper Amazon. I won't take time to tell that story, but it was profound. And maybe I'll come back because that really is a good one. But then we were going to Machu Picchu. And on the way to Machu Picchu, we stopped at a sacred area that was filled with hot springs. And the women would bathe there to purify themselves.
What's the name of the area?
Ollantaytambo was the name of this little town. Sweet, beautiful little simple town. And so we were in Ollantaytambo. And because we were kind of some of the main guests, they put us up in a really nice Spanish kind of reclaimed old hotel. And the Potawatomi medicine man was talking to the manager at one point, and the manager asked what they were doing there and why Indians would be coming to that area. And he said that we were with the group to reunite with South American Indians in accordance with a prophecy that was ancient prophecy. And the prophecy is when the eagle flies with the condor, she will return, she being mother. And he explained that when the Panama Canal was built, this whole North and South America was one, and that it cut her at her waist, cut her in half, and that's caused a lot of problems in many different ways. And so this prophecy was to bring the northern teachers and the southern teachers together. So this was the first step of that. And so we were in Ollantaytambo, and the manager said, I don't usually allow people to go down, but this hotel was built over a sacred stream. And it's still down there. It's a hot springs. And if you would like to go down to purify, it would be an honor for us to have you do that. And so he went down and checked it out, and he came back up and he said that in his tradition, men don't sweat with women. So he said the 3 of the men would go down and sweat together, and then David and I could come later. And so we did that. And on the 3rd door in the lodge, and we just did it like a sweat lodge because that's what we know how to do. So we'd get out and cool down and then get back in. Beautiful little tiny narrow stream. And in the 3rd door, which is where often is the most powerful door for some reason, at least for me, these spirits came in, and there were 4 in front and a man in front of him, so there were 5. And then there were people behind them, but I couldn't see them. And the guy in front stood forward, and he said he knew why we were there, what we were doing, and that they represented the spirits of the mountains, and that they are in touch with the spirits of the mountains all the way around the world because the world is all connected. And that he wanted to give me a song that I should share with other people, which is why I'm sharing it with you and whoever's listening. That's my chance to get it out there further. So this was what I sang on the album, one of the songs I sang on the album. And it's very short. And rather than hear much of my story, because you've heard a lot of David's, I would like to share this song for you and your group. And it's for everybody.
Yes.
I give you this song, whoever's listening. I was told to give this song and to share it from the Mountain Spirits. And they're asking people to sing this song to start to bring the health back to Pachamama and to restore Earth. So that's all they said. Then they disappeared. So this is the song that they sang, and it's real easy. And I was so afraid that I would forget it. And he knew that. So he said, I'll sing it 4 times, which is the way most Indian songs chants are sung 4 times, anyway, for the directions. And he said, I'll sing it 4 times. The first time, just listen. So just everybody just sit up and just breathe and just listen. And the second time, you pick up the melody a little bit. And the third time, you start hearing the words. And the 4th time, you got it, and it's your song. And you could teach that to children. Children love it. It's a simple song. And we can tell them that it's for the mountains. And it's just, here it is. So this is my gift from those people. Thanks a lot. It's called Way Way Icha. And then you go way, way. Like with an, Okay. Way, way, Icha. Icha, way, way. Way, way, Icha. Icha, way, way. Icha, way, Icha, way. Icha, way, way. Way, way, Icha. Icha, way, way. Way, way, Icha. Icha, way, way. Icha, way, Icha, way. Icha, way, way. Way, way, Icha. Icha, way, way. Way, way, Icha. Icha, way, way. Icha, way. Icha, way. Icha, way. Way, way, Icha. Icha, way, way. Way, way, Icha. Icha, way, way. Icha, way. Icha, way. Icha, way. Okay, now you can ask me anything you want.
Well, that song kind of takes, I'm just speaking for me, but I was singing it with you.
Yes.
I mean, it kind of takes you up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you perform that? Do you sing that? Part of what I remember growing up with kids on the reservation, and they had to bus in, get up at like 3:30 in the morning, and it was just such a tough life. But there always remember about them a resonance with this kind of song. That life is music, music is life. There's this vibration that happens throughout life that I don't think the psychology of Europeans totally understand.
I'll tell another story just speaking to that, and then you can just talk about things because I'll have something to put in on that. And this is something that David and I have both found is that's just an amazing thing. All these years, we still remember it so clearly. We were at Taos Pueblo. I don't know, should I take the time to tell about Grandpa?
Of course.
Okay, we got to Taos Pueblo because, he's going back for them. Anyway, I was living as a single mother with a bunch of kids, just struggling to get by and really struggling. And one day I was vacuuming the floor. I mean, just so simple, no lofty thoughts or anything else. And this little old Indian man appeared in my living room. So I turned off the vacuum and I said, "Grandfather, how can I help you?" Because that's what I was trained to say. And how can I help you? And in really poor English, he said, "Be with me in Taos before the year is out." And he disappeared. And my first thought was, how could I get to Taos? I don't have the money. But I had met David, and in another really neat story, but I don't think there's time for all of that. But anyway, David said he would take me to New Mexico before the year was out because he was going down for a healing session with something that's someplace down there. And so he said he would fly me from Spokane to Denver, and then he'd drive me, and he'd go down and get his session. And then on the way back, we'd stop at Taos. So we did all that. We stopped at Taos, and we got up early in the morning because I had this image. When I was young, when I was 10 to 12, we lived in Albuquerque, and my father used to take me to Taos Pueblo for ceremonies, and I just loved them. They really, it was the first Indian things I'd ever done. And so that awakened something in me. So we went to Taos, and I had this image that at dawn, he would be standing there, this beautiful old man that I saw in my living room. So we got there, we were there all day, and we were looking everywhere. And a lot of the houses facing the plaza are turned into little shops to sell curios to the tourists. And we went into all of those, and David would say, we see a lot of old men, and nope, that's not him, no, all day. And finally, David, and we had just met recently, we hardly knew each other, and he said, "Look, I've been here all day, and you think some Indian showed up in your living room and told you to come down here, but he doesn't seem to be here, and I'm hungry." So I said, okay. And then we started to leave, and there was a little tiny sign that we hadn't seen before, and scratched in really like third grader letters. It said curios with an arrow around the back. And I said, we haven't been there yet. If we go there and he's not there, then we'll just go. Okay, and I was really embarrassed. So he said, okay. So we went around the back. And we knocked 3 times, no answer. And David says, "That's it, I'm going to go eat." And he starts walking down.
About the blue door.
Down the little blue door, tiny. The door was like he had to bow down to get into the door. Turquoise door. But anyway, so the door, 3 times, and David's leaving. And so I said, okay. So I picked up my bag, and I was trying to catch up with him, and I heard the door creak open. And Grandpa stepped out, and he said, my children, I've been waiting all day." And it was exactly him that I had manifested in my living room. And that's pretty incredible. So he took us in. He eventually adopted us. We moved to Santa Fe to be closer. That was one reason. And we were so close that one Thanksgiving, we were having dinner in Santa Fe with his family, because one of his granddaughters had a home there. One of his daughters had a home there. And we had eaten our Thanksgiving dinner already, and I got a phone call, and she said, "You have to come for Thanksgiving dinner. Grandpa's here, and he wants you to come." And I said, "Well, we've already had Thanksgiving dinner." And she said, "You have to come because he won't eat. We're all here, and he won't eat." And he says, "Where are my other children?" And so we went, and we had another Thanksgiving dinner. And she asked me at one point, she said, I never understood the relationship between my father and you two. And I said, "We don't understand it either. But we were adopted, and we still go visit." And he appeared. And then he appeared one time again when he was dying. I used to do women's workshops. And I was doing one at Old Caliente Hot Springs in New Mexico. And there was a phone call, and I was in a teepee by these motels, and they had a teepee set up, and all the women were in there with me. And the woman came out and said, "You have an emergency phone call." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And she said, "Somebody said your grandfather died." Well, my personal grandfathers wasn't them. And so I told the women that then it had to be grandpa. So I told the women to take a break. And I sat and was just talking to grandpa in my mind and was crying. And so I got my head down and my eyes closed and I'm crying and I'm just kind of thinking and telling him how much I loved him and how much I appreciated everything he taught us. And he says, "Why you cry?" And I open my eyes and he's standing there again, right in front of me. He says, "Why you cry?" And I said, "They said you died." And he said, "Yeah, be happy, be happy. Be happy, look, happy, ha ha ha." And he started laughing and being really silly and kind of bouncing around until I started laughing. And as soon as I started laughing, he says, "Yeah, be happy." And he disappeared. And at the funeral, a couple of days later, I was cutting veggies with his daughters. And one of his daughters said, "Our dad seems to love you so much. I don't know why." And I said, "Well, we loved him." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Because of everything he taught us." And she said, "Like what?" And what came to mind was he had just died in what he said in the teepee. And I said, "He taught me how to die." And if I could take just a little bit more of that one. Later I talked to another one of his daughters who was with him in the Taos Pueblo, in the hospital in Taos. And he had Alzheimer's. And he didn't recognize any of his children. He didn't recognize his wife anymore. He was over 100. The only person he recognized was David, if David started working on his legs. Because David would always do that. And then he'd bang him on the back and say, "My boy, my boy." And so he was in the hospital. And she was sitting next to him. And he sat up in bed suddenly and he started chanting. And so she thought it was beautiful, but a nurse's aide came in and said, you can't do that. You can't do that. It'll disturb the other people. You have to be quiet." And he was just chanting and smiling and didn't even hear her. He was in a different state. And so she ran out. She brought in the nurse. And the nurse said, "Frank, you can't sing like that. It'll bother the other people. Now you have to stop." And so she kept after him. And he was not conscious of her at all. And so she went out and she brought in the doctor. This is what the daughter says. So she brought in the doctor. The doctor said, "Frank, you can't be doing this anymore. Now you pay attention to me and you hear me. You have to stop this right now." And Grandpa was just out. And so they all left. And right after they left the room, Grandpa sat up really straight in bed and he said, "Here they come, here they come. Here I go." That's kind of Nanny was. That's kind of teaching some of that.
You mentioned before we actually started recording about your own near-death, after-death, during-death experience.
Okay.
And this seems like a perfect time to talk about that.
Okay, you'll have to keep track of time for me.
No, that's fine. But what strikes me in conversations with you and David, and even other guests that I've had on the podcast, but also this is something that I have been just compelled with interest about, they call it parapsychology now. It used to be called paranormal psychology. Now it's parapsychology. Institute of Noetic Sciences has libraries worth of peer-reviewed research about this, but it is so common, and I think it's even more common in the Native community, that there it's normalized. In regular white culture, it's sort of on the margins and maybe even pathologized. But the near-death experience it was sort of the tip of the iceberg, which broke open the ability in scientific circles to kind of talk about this as a fairly common experience. And so, if talk about yours.
I was in the hospital with my seventh child, and I was at home with my seventh child rather before I got to the hospital. And I went in to take a shower, and I looked down, and the insides of me were falling out, and I was bleeding all over the place. And I screamed, and we had a young woman that was kind of helping me out at that time. And she came in and saw what was going on, and she called an ambulance. And the ambulance raced me to the hospital. They called my husband and said, I don't know how fast you can get here, but your wife is bleeding to death. And he said, I can make it in 20 minutes. And he said, and this is what I heard after, was the doctor said, you better make it faster than that, because she's going. And so in the hospital, all I remember is a very similar part to a lot of people's stories, is I was going through the tunnel to the light. And I was going like Superman flies, like head first, and just going. And then I got to the light, and everything stopped. And then I didn't have a body, but I was very aware, just like as if I had a body. I don't know how to explain that, but it was absolute bliss. It's just like other people talk about. It was bliss. And I'd had some pretty difficult times in my life. And it was like, I'm out. I'd tried to commit suicide a couple times when I was a child, and then later, and then I figured out that all I was doing was beating my body up. So I gave up on that, but this was like, I'm out. And I was just so happy. And then a voice, really gentle, magnificent voice, male voice, said, you've seen it all, and now you have to go back. And I said, I'm not going back. And then the voice said, you have to go back. And I said, no, I got out and I'm not going back. And the voice was like, very patient, and said, this was for you to see so you know that you have choice in your life. I didn't know I had choice. So that was huge. And he said, now that you know that, you can go back and live different. Boom, I woke up in the hospital. I left that husband. I changed my life. I started signing up for healing classes. I became a professional psychic for a while. I used to do readings, and I thought, and none of that wasn't my thing. So I try stuff, and they go, no, that's not that either. And then I went to a Medicine Man Jam, which was medicine men way up in northern Canada. And I had studied herbalism with a teacher in Canada. And his teacher was having a big gathering of medicine people. And he asked if I wanted to go. So I could tell a lot of stories about that, but just about death, I think, is to make it quick. His name was Buffalo Child, and he was one of the most amazing people we'd ever heard of before we met him. But anyway, we went out, and I was supposed to join a group, and that would take too long to tell all that part of it. But anyway, I wasn't with the group when we went to present ourselves to Buffalo Child when we arrived at the camp. And so I needed to go and present myself, which was protocol. And when I went in, there was nobody in the teepee. When I went over earlier to do that, there was a huge long line of people standing in line, and somebody told me they were all waiting for healings. And I thought, that's going to take too long. There was a stream, and I'd rather go sit by the stream, and then when there's not so much line of people, then I'll go up and get in line. And I don't know what happened at the time, but when I got there, there was nobody around. Everybody was gone. And so I went over to his chair. There was a chair on one side and a blanket on the other. And I went over to his chair, and I thought, I've really blown it now. It's been heights of rudeness. And I don't know how to apologize to him, and I don't even know where he is or what it looks like. But I just sat there and begged forgiveness from whoever he was for my rudeness. And I started to cry. And he said, well, what do you want? And I opened my eyes, and he was sitting in front of me. And that's a long story, too. But he's the reason, at one point, he said, what do you really want? And I said, well, I really need a good man. I have all these kids. I really need a good man. I can't do it alone. And he said, oh, that's easy. Go lay down. So I went over the blanket, and I laid down, and I zonked out. And he came to me, and he said, don't worry about a thing. I'll take care of it. And he told me a couple other things. And 2 weeks later, I met David. And we've been together for how many years?
Forever.
47.
Seven.
That's what I thought. 47 years. That's pretty good, because we compared stories, and at the same time, might not have been the exact time, but within that period of time that I was telling Buffalo Child that David was praying for a partner. And I think he just went, okay, these two, let's see if they can help each other.
Was this a pivotal time that led you to a more profound, deeper spiritual journey?
We were already deeply into spiritual stuff, both of us individually, for a long time. But there's just so many layers. Like, we've been initiated and married by Tukurjin Rinpoche, who is one of the 4 pillars. Or David, I can see him nodding, so David must have talked about him. Tukurjin Rinpoche was an amazing Rinpoche, Tibetan Buddhist Rinpoche. And we had such a close connection with him. And then Mahavatar Babaji just started going like this to come. And then it's a long, funny story, but I won't go into that, how it happened. But he went like this. And I wrote him a letter, and I said, I would love to come to you. We don't have any money. And in a month, we had $5,000 on a chain letter. Which was just, how unlikely is that? And just things like that. Yeah, so, and they are all deeply, deeply personal to us.
Is Babaji the sort of paragon of all the spiritual masters that you have encountered in your life, or are there a number of people that fit into kind of a cluster or a confluence of this influence upon you?
Out of everybody I met, and I've met quite a few remarkable spiritual masters, Probably Bob is the most powerful I've ever read. Yeah.
David has mentioned
Yeah.
that Babaji saved your life. Can you talk
Okay,
about
it's
that?
hard. How much time do we have?
We have
Well,
unlimited
I'll try
time.
to just kick to the chair.
No, tell the story. It's so beautiful.
Well, I don't know where to start. Okay. So I wrote to him, and but we had both. How I connected with Babaji was I was at some kind of spiritual gathering. I used to attend a lot of spiritual healing gatherings, stuff like that. And there was a picture of Babaji, and I'd never seen that picture before. And a woman was selling books. And I said, "Who's that?" And she said, "Oh, that's Babaji." And I said, "How can I learn about him?" And she picked up a book, Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda. And so I bought the book, and I bought a picture of Babaji. And I went home and I read the book through about the same time, not exactly the same time, but in that time frame. David was studying with sister
Yogananda.
with Yogananda, with a group with Yogananda, and so we were on that path to, before we ever got together separately. And so that when we went to India, there's so much to tell, and I can't. It's hard to separate out the piece of where to start to talk about him, but I had been very angry for a very long time, since childhood. Get stuffed and all that. Which most people who knew me at that time would never say that I was an angry person. I got Babaji's. I was sick, and David probably can tell this part better because I was really in a different state and kind of out of it. But I got very sick, and David went to Babaji for help. And Babaji was holding forth.
Wait a minute. How you got sick is you go.
Oh, Baba, yeah, that's right. Baba said you go. And it's that same thing, like trying to kick me out of heaven to go back. You go. So he said you go. And I couldn't argue with him, but it just broke my heart. And I was falling apart. And then I got sick. And I was getting so I was vomiting and projectile vomiting. And David went to Baba and said, Kundalini is, that was the name he gave me. Baba gave me, and he said, Kundalini is very sick. And Baba says, very, very good. And David says, no, you don't understand, really sick. And Baba said something to a little lady across the way and says, she made that medicine for you yesterday. No, she told David that she made the medicine. Baba told her to make the medicine the day before. Yeah. So, and I was just supposed to chug it down. So I drank the medicine down, and I started getting worse vomiting. And I thought, he's going to kill, I'm going to die here. But if I can die in a sacred place, that's as good as it gets. So I just gave in to that. And I thought, wow, I came all the way here to die. Let's do it. And at one point, I vomited up something that I could only describe as a large chunk of liver. It looked exactly like raw liver. And of course, liver is where we hide our anger. And so it was like a piece of it where all the anger got coagulated by that medicine, perhaps, broke off and came up. And it caught in my throat. It was so big, cut in my throat. And I was like, and I couldn't get it out. And finally, it popped out and fell into the bucket that David had for me. And we both looked down at it, and it looked evil. I don't know what evil looks like, that was the sense I got, was that was the, and David gave me some water to drink, and then I went down to bathe in the Ganges, and I came out of the Ganges resurrected. Like, all that anger was years and years, but some of it just really intense. I get irritated once in a while, but I don't have that seething whatever anger, whatever that poison. It's a poison that the body creates. Yeah, I got rid of it.
I meant to ask David this, but it's just occurring to me now. The real gravity of the experience with Babaji. Do you feel like you communicate with Babaji on a day-to-day basis, minute to minute?
No, it's every day.
Episodic?
It's every day. It's several times a day,
constant...
and it's not. I meditate. I do mantras, and but mostly we have his pictures around the house, and I'll see him smiling, and I'm just in that state. So when it was all over and we were getting ready to go, I went up to him, and he was sitting up in front of the temple, and I said, I was thanking him for everything, and I said, when I go home, how can I share this? How can I do this, the temple and the people and stuff like that? I wanted to be part of it. When I went home, I didn't know of any ashrams in the United States. And I said, how can I be part of something like this at home? And Babaji looked around at the temple and people walking around and everything. And he went like this. Not for you. And I said, well, then what do I do? And he said, go home and be happy. So that's my charge, and I do my best. Sometimes I'm not doing it as well as other times, but it's in the back of my head always that if I'm doing the right thing, I'm being happy, and then sharing that.
The other thing he said at that time is, this is not for you.
Yeah.
You go to the formats.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, David just reminded me. He said, when I said all of this, he went like that, and then he said, not for you. He said, these people need this to reach the formless, but not for you. You go to the formless.
What has that looked like for you since Babaji gave you that commission?
It's just being here. Without being too caught up with attachments and decisions, and I can get distracted with stuff and get involved about dichotomies or good and bad and what's going on in the world. But then I have to bring myself back
So you had a 15-year-old daughter that was with you. What number was she out of the 7?
She was the fourth.
Fourth.
Yeah, Chris.
And that was Chris, right?
Lorain was in there.
Oh, Lorain. And there's Lorain.
Chris.
You're right. Sorry.
Fifth? Okay. Well, do you talk to Chris or your
At that
other
time,
children about this experience?
It was in Hawaii. Terry was in Canada. Lori had just left, had just gotten married. So it was Chris and our youngest daughter, Roxanne. And so we invited them both to go with us. And Chris said, yeah, I'm in. Because she's a world traveler. Just for as long, she's always going somewhere. In fact, she's off on a trip right now. And the morning after I invited them to go, and we started looking at maps and pictures of India and stuff. And Roxanne had a dream that she went with us and that a white elephant had stepped on her and killed her, and she was terrified to go. And I have thought often that how that would have changed her life if she had gone and had, like the white elephant is such a sacred sign.
Well, I know Roxanne had a very tragic ending to her life.
Well, early tragedy too. She was a very special person. She was very beautiful. She was a major model in Europe, and for Dior and all of the big names, Armani and you name it. She was there and modeled in London and Paris and Milan. Spoke 7 languages. Was brilliant. And that's a different life. And something happened, and she came home broken and tearful.
I don't know, this is real cheesy amateur psychological analysis, but it seems to me that a lot of people who have a transcendent cosmic consciousness kind of an experience, it's hard for them traversing the spiritual world and the material world. I'm not quite sure where they fit sometimes, and they need something that's more grounding or something that gives them a frame of reference. Is that at all what you were sensing was going on with Roxanne?
Yeah, she really needed a lot of grounding, and she was gifted in a lot of ways. She was quite psychic. She was reading Shakespeare and Blavatsky in the 7th grade. That's the kind of mind she had, and she never quit. She just, but something got her.
So, the spiritual masters that have really influenced you in that circle around or outside of Babaji.
Of course, but I guess David has talked about him. This incredible. Well,
you talk about it. You had your experience.
I talked about him being married. That another one. He is a very humble man, and he. Chief Harville Looking Horse, the 16th keeper of the White Buffalo Cat Pipe. And my teacher, Irma Barristops, with all the same tribe, Booth Lakota. Well, I didn't mention that I ran a youth leadership camp, wilderness camp for kids. And for 9 years, Irma Barristops came every summer, and she usually brought Chief Looking Horse, who was not a chief at that time, he was a young man. And he would sit in the circles and talk to the kids. Now he says prayers for presidents, and goes all over the world on peace missions. And he's a man of absolute peace. And he carries peace in a different way than like Mandela or or someone like that. But I'd like to tell one, I think my favorite short story on Arvel, because I traveled around the world with him to sacred sites in lands that were in peril or violence at that time. And they only went places where he was invited to come and help maintain peace. So we went to some very interesting places. And we were in South Africa at a time of incredible violence and rapings and killings and house burnings and stuff like that. And when we arrived, we were at the airport, and they sent a big greeting group to meet us in the airport. And they told us everything that was going on and how they would take care of us. And at one point they said, the situation is very violent here, just like you know. This is why we want you to come and pray here with us. We're hoping that you can make a difference. But I want you to know that we have a bus for you for your group. And we have a car with armed men in it in the front of the bus. And we'll have armed men in a car in the back of the bus. And Arvel immediately said, no, I'm a man of peace and I can't have a gun. He said, well, you don't have to have the gun. And he said, no, I can't have guns around me. And they looked like they were just in shock and said, you're an international leader, and if anything happened to you, it would be a responsibility too big for any of us to try to deal with. It would be a world event. And so Arvel lowered his head and closed his eyes, and when he does that, I know something's going to happen. And so he put his head down, and he was silent for a moment, and he looks up and he goes, okay, they can have guns. And everybody goes, yeah. And he says, no bullets. That's who our delivered is.
Yeah. This must have been during the apartheid government.
The granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi was there with us. It was a remarkable thing. 5,000 people walked at a peace parade. And in Australia, 1,000 people came to one of his ceremonies called Wiping Away the Tears. And it was to wipe away the tears from all of the brutality with the Aboriginals and the ripping away of children, and just like the residential schools here, same in Australia. And 1,000 people came up in this big circle, and he blessed every one of them to wipe away their tears. And then we went to Japan, and we went to Hiroshima first and prayed for peace there at the memorial. And there were a couple thousand people there. And then we went to Mount Hiroshima, which is the most sacred mountain. Fujiyama. And the newspaper said there were 7,000 people in a circle for peace. And then not a typhoon, what's the other one? This, like the typhoon. Nope, it's just wind and rain.
Tsunami?
It's a typhoon.
Yeah, but it wasn't called a typhoon. Oh, okay, typhoon. Anyway, this enormous storm, like a typhoon. They called it a different word, but anyway, came while the ceremony was going on. And there was the wind was so hard, and part of the ceremony was Arvel lights a little fire and burned smudge on it for his prayers. So he had to have fire, and he couldn't have the fire because it was raining like crazy. And the wind was just blowing like terrible. And so they built this little tent in the center of this enormous circle. And there must have been about 10 of us that went in. And the organizers in Japan Arvel and his wife, and my daughter was with my youngest daughter, and I could go in as an elder, but she couldn't. So she stood outside and told me what happened outside. And the Ainu were there, and the Ainu, and I never knew this. The Ainu were the indigenous people to Japan, and they were driven out to a little island. So the Ainus came and were brought back, and they were the ones that initiated the ceremony because it was originally their land. So that was quite a ceremony. And when all the prayers were done, we stepped out, and the drums were going then. And as soon as we walked out, the wind stopped, and then the rain stopped, and then a huge rainbow came out, and 7,000 people were crying together, just crying. That was the scene. That was something else. Yeah. So that's horrible.
A couple of times that I have met, and I've only met Arvel a couple of times, and it struck me that his physical posture is as if he were carrying the weight of the world. His movements are slow, and I know he's getting older, so obviously that's a byproduct of that. But it struck me that, we had him as a guest at the Unitarian Universalist Church there in Denver once upon a time. It's been several years ago now.
At a church in Denver?
That particular time.
Oh, that was the story.
You guys were there.
Oh, wow. I forgot that you were there. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I was a co-facilitator for the community forum, and I contacted you and knew that Arvel was going to be in town, and he and his wife came, and you guys were there. But that episode, that experience with him, it struck me that it's the weight of the world that he's kind of carrying around. And you don't want to put yourself in this position, I know, and I don't detect any of that kind of weight on you. But for me, you are on the leading edge of this kind of spiritual awakening. Maybe it was your mission to come back home and be happy, but you are in demand. Even coming down to Tucson, University of Arizona wants to have you come and talk. The kind of spirit and energy that you share with people is in great need. So do you sense that, or does this just feel like something natural that you need to do, or how does that strike you?
That's a lot to take in. It's mostly just me, and what comes through is what comes through. So I think I've just been so blessed by so many people that I carry a lot of that, and people feel it.
Yeah. Where do you get your resources and energy?
It comes up from the earth. It comes down from the heavens. It's just, it's
all around,
around everybody if we just take it in.
Yeah.
We have to take it in. We have to bring it in.
Well, this
we
is
have
one
to
thing that
want it in here. It won't. It doesn't just. Yeah, it doesn't force its way in. That kind of energy. We have to invite it in and open your heart.
Yeah. All of my academic training gets in the way of this, but I have come to.
Yeah, we've all got all that. Okay. That was the story I wanted to tell too about Grandpa. This is a good one. This is for your academic side, because I didn't tell about Grandpa.
Not that.
Okay. This is good. We were at Taos Pueblo, and it began to rain, and Grandpa grabbed my hand, and And he walked me over to a truck. He didn't have a pickup or didn't drive at all. So I don't know whose truck we were sitting in, but we got into the truck and we were sitting there and people were running around and getting chairs out of the way because it was festival. And all of a sudden it got a little clearer. And so Grandpa and I started just talking while we were waiting for the rain to stop. And I said that he had told us some experiences that he had had when he was young. And I said, who are you going to pass that power on to? And I was thinking...
He was a weatherman.
Yeah, he was a weatherman. He could bring the rain and put it back. And so I asked him, your daughter told me that you were a weatherman. He goes, yes. And I said, why don't you just make this storm stop? And he said, we need the rain. Sure. Okay. So I said, so can you make the weather come and then go away? And he goes, yeah. And I said, now I lost my frame of reference there. And so he was talking about the weather. Oh, so I said, are you going to pass that on to your oldest son, that power? And he goes, no. And I thought that was interesting. And so I said, would your second son get it? And he goes, no. And I said, well, what are your daughters get it? And he goes, no. And that just kind of, I was searching for, he could do so many things that were absolutely amazing. And I said, what are you going to pass that on to somebody who would die? And he said, I can't. And I said, why not? And he said, because I was the last one that didn't go to school. Everybody else went to school, and it changed their brains.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Well, did you have some rather sideways experiences in school growing up? I know this is the dark history of a lot of the United States, what we've done with our indigenous cultures and Native Americans and forcing them to speak English, lose their language, lose their traditions. Do you have any personal experiences with that being pushed out of you?
My mother was in a residential school for 14 years. When she graduated, she didn't want to have anything to do with Indians. She was ashamed of being an Indian. That's what she was taught. And my grandmother couldn't be much of a mother to her because when she was born, she was an illegitimate child in Canada from a Cree woman and a Royal Mounted Police. And the Mounties couldn't marry Indians. And so any children that came from relationships, and there were many, were put up for adoption. So my grandmother was adopted by a farmer as slave labor and brought into Montana to work the farms for him. She ran away from home when she was 15 and made her way over to the Blackfeet Reservation and then married a Blackfeet man. And that's how Mom came to be. So that's a lot of intergenerational trauma. So I've worked with a lot of groups with that.
Well, this is the other thing that I think is happening, and I've had this sense for a long time, and I'm not sure exactly what my role in all of this is, in a bad way or a good way, but this ancient spiritual wisdom that now organizations like the Institute of Noetic Sciences or parapsychological associations and all of this kind of scientific research, Tao of physics kinds of stuff, are coming to realizations that have existed for ages. The ancient mystics and spiritual masters have known this. So now we're trying to prove something that we already know. And so I see that as somewhat of a promising development, but it's also, at the same time, brings all of its kind of dominant cultural problems with it. I think that is one of the reasons you are in big demand, is because the academics want to have the spirit that goes along with their science. And so that's kind of one way. And maybe this is going to sound a little too critical, but I think that's one way to sort of cheat the system, is to have somebody like you come in and do presentations or talk, and it makes it look legitimate because it's at like a university or college or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you ever get that sense?
It's come to mind a few times. Yeah. Yeah. And I just got invited last week.
Yeah.
I'm on a panel at the University of Arizona, and one woman on the panel is Yaqui, but she's working with the Aram here. And when she invited me, when she found out that I ran a wilderness camp for kids, she asked if I'd be interested in, helping in some way with children's program that their tribal council is putting together about bringing culture to kids who have lost, families have fallen away from that culture, and trying to, bring the language back and to just remind them who they are. That's so needed, Robert.
Yeah. In fact, I would be remiss, and I can't believe I forgot this. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you won a United Nations Humanitarian Award once upon a time. I can't remember what year. And the other thing that I would be remiss about in talking about your organizing and running the Rediscovery Four Corners Rediscovery School. I can't remember. I think it's Rediscovery Four Corners, which really speaks to retaining or relearning.
That's what rediscovery means, is rediscovering who they are. And we had, that was based on a vision I had, and then I had some very generous people help me put a 501c3 together and start raising funds and manifesting that vision, which was to bring kids from different tribes together for a camp, and to empower them to become young leaders and had pride in who they were, and culture, and they share cultural similarities and differences, and we had outward bound instructors, and we had Native American leaders, and it was a really good program. Ran for a long time, 9 years, and a lot of kids came through that program. And I loved that. 2 of my daughters were in it. Chris became head counselor after a few years, and our daughter Lori was the head cook and kind of overseer of all the art projects and things like that. It was really good, and we had some very interesting people that we learned a lot from.
Can you say why that kind of
one
wound
reason,
down? And
towards the end of that, a lot of people who had gone through Outward Bound decided they wanted to run Outward Bound programs, and they started showing up all over the place. Different states were having wilderness programs, and there were a lot of accidents that happened pretty quickly in just a couple of years, and the insurance rate within 5 years was doubled, and all my kids came for free. I raised the money, and so I had no way of making up that difference. So it was insurance that killed that program. But I have a way, I kind of do things for 9 years anyway, so maybe it was just time. So I didn't fight it. But like I taught Native American Studies at New York University for 9 years. And I did that program for 9 years. And I did, I don't know, a couple of the women's circles I did for 9 years. It's like that's a full circle, and then I go on to the next thing.
Yeah. Just like David, we're going to have to do a second episode of this, and I will do better at making sure I've got a good set of questions that you can think
fun.
about.
I like your questions.
But this is great, and I am really happy that this was kind of a surprise session. I was expecting to do kind of the second one with David, but this has been absolutely terrific. And so this gives me a lot of energy for, what I think can be some, pointed stuff for the next time we talk like this. So. Yeah. Good deal. Well, I'm going to get us signed off and then stay on just for a minute after we stop the recording, and we'll set up something for the next time. So this has been the Cosmic Consciousness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Sage. The academic stuff gets thrown in there. And this has been a delightful, insightful, engaging conversation with Lorain Fox Davis, a good friend. So until next time, peace to all.